Be'ezras Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Kidushin Daf Tezvav. And we're going to begin from Daf Tezvav, Daf Yudalit Amid. But before we begin, I just want to go through a few psukim which may not be so familiar. Some should be familiar, but that's all the daf is going to be discussing, is how these psukim interrelate with each other. So in the first pasuk I'm going to talk to you is, you have to know that when the Torah begins Parshas Mishpatim, and we're familiar that it discusses Kisikne Eved Ivri, as you see on the screen, Sheisham Yavoid, Uvashvish Yetze Lechav Shechinam, that an Eved Ivri works for 6 years. That Parsha is talking about when the Eved was sold by Bezdin. Why does a Bezdin sell a person to be an Eved? The answer is because the person stole money and he went bankrupt. He has no money to pay back his investors or whatever it was. So he sold for 6 years. Now, this is a beautiful thing because it's very interesting, because you could have Madoff, who stole billions of dollars, right, and can't pay it back. So in the Torah, you would think that in order to be paid back, he should be sold as an Eved Ivri for the rest of his life. But that's not the way the Torah works. The Torah works, we're just trying to rectify him, not really pay people back. So the Eved Ivri is only sold for one time 6 years, and that's it. And then he has to go free. And the money that the Adon paid, he bought him in cash, and that we know from other psukim, that he buys it in cash, and he pays for that. He pays for that. It goes to the Bezdin, and Bezdin tries to give back to people he owes money to. And then we're going to learn that Eved has the potential to stay on and to become an Eved Nirtza. Okay, that's one thing you have to know. He can stay on if he drills the ear, then he stays till Yovel. Then the Torah tells us in Parshas Bahar that when Yovel comes, this is a pasuk on the Liberty Bell. The Jubilee year, the 50th year, is a freedom year. V'shaftem ish elech v'zaseh. Everybody goes back home to his family. Then in that parsha, it says another parsha of Eved, and that is v'chiyamech achicha imach b'nimkalach. If your brother gets poor and he can't make a living and he sells himself to you, there the Torah doesn't say anything about 6 years. Lo yisabed boy avodas aved. He's not sold as a slave. So what does the Torah say? He doesn't sell. He's not like a regular Eved Kanaini. You have to view him as a salaried worker or a contractor, and he's being sold till Yovel. That's and when he goes out to Yovel, he goes out. You actually took in his family, so you have to pay for this kid's tuition, and then he goes back home. Okay, that's what the Torah says, and don't work him too hard if he's your Eved Ivri. Then the Chumash describes another parsha, which describes that if a goy became very rich in Israel, and why? Because imach, he partnered up with a Jew, so he's a rich goy, and now one of your brothers, an Eved, a Jewish person, was sold to this guy as an Eved, right? So the Torah says, and there it says kesef, he was sold with money. So the Torah says that a relative should try to bail him out, right? Or if he becomes, buy him back from the goy, because we don't want him to stay by the goy. He's going to learn how to do avodah zarah. Or if he becomes rich, somebody gives him money, or he wins the lottery, then the Eved should allow to be buy himself back from the goy. Or Vinigal or anybody could buy him back, okay? And then the Torah says he goes free. And if he doesn't go free, then he goes out by Yovel. That's what the Torah says. He goes out by Yovel, which we'll have to understand what that means. But of course, we're talking about where the goy listens to the Jew. The goy is a citizen of the state of Israel, so he follows the Jewish law. Okay, that's some of the psukim. And then one more parsha. The Torah describes if your brother or sold to you for 6 years and worked for you for 6 years by Bezdin, he was sold for you by Bezdin. Then the mitzvah is that you have to send him out. You have to send him out and gift him. You see, Hanek Tanaklo, you have to give him gifts when he leaves. And you shouldn't feel bad that you're giving him gifts, because he worked for you as Sachir. He worked for you for 6 years. So that's all this Gemara. So let's go into the Gemara. The Gemara wanted to say that for various reasons, that the Gemara wanted to know, how do you know that a moicher atzmoi, someone who sells himself as an Eved, how do you know that you can purchase him with kesef? How do you know? So one Mandi Amar learned, it says Sachir. There's a Gzeir Shava that just like Machruhu Bezdin, we know for a fact that Machruhu Bezdin gets bought by kesef. So Moicher Atzmai also gets purchased by kesef. So the Gemara says, but there are opinions that doesn't have this Gzeir Shava Sachir. Let me just show you on the screen what the Gzeir Shava Sachir is. Here by Moicher Bezdin it says Kimishna Schar Sachir Avad Cheshei Shanim, and by Kiyama Chachicha it says don't work him too hard. Kisachir, treat him as a worker. So there's a Gzeir Shava. Whatever applies by one, by Moicher Bezdin, applies by the other. But there are other people that learn that there is no Gzeir Shava Sachir. There is no Gzeir Shava. So the question is, how do you know that Moicher Atzmoi gets purchased with kesef? So the Gemara says, because it says v'chi sasig, right? So v'chi sasig, it just like when a goy buys a Jewish slave, he buys it with money. So moicher atzmai, also if a Jew buys a Jewish slave, also purchase it with money. So then the Gemara got into a discussion that there, and this is where we're going to be starting from. Amarav Tavyumi, about 10 lines from the bottom. Amarav Tavyumi. Basically, what the Gemara is trying to discover over here is who is the Mandi Amar that does not darshan a Gzeir Shava Sachir that equalizes whatever Mechru Bezdin happens by Moicher Atzmai. So the Gemara wanted to say it is the Tanakama. Why? Because the Tanakama has very much differences by Moicher Atzmai and Machruah Bezdin. Tanakama has big differences between Moicher Atzmai and Machruah Bezdin. So if there's differences, then he must not darshan the Gzeir Shava or Sachir. Okay, here we go. And you're going to learn a lot of different halachas that apply by one, not by the other. Rav Tavyumi said, Bishmei Dabai, in the name of Baya, the Kuli Alma, everybody holds Yalif Sachir. We have Gzeir Shava Sachir that tells you normally you equalize whatever is by Machruah Bezdin applies by Moicher Atzmai, whatever is by Moicher Atzmai applies by Machruah Bezdin. But the Tanakama says it's not always equal because there's certain psukim that limit it. So Gemara is going to ask the question on all the things that the Tanakama says that are differences between Moicher Atzmai and Machruah Bezdin. Why does the Tanakama hold that if someone who sells himself, he can sell himself for a 10-year term? It doesn't have to be a 6-year term. So because it says, Miyat Rachmana, because the Torah gave it a limit, it's Gabe Bachruah Bezdin, Va'avotcha Sheishanim. He should work for you 6 years. By Moicher Machruah Bezdin, the Torah says that by Hanik Tanik, that parsha, it says, Va'avotcha Sheishanim. He works for you for 10 years. Only he works for 6 years term. The Lo Moicher Atzmai. A Moicher Atzmai does not necessarily sell himself for a 6-year term. He could sell himself for a 10-year term. He's not limited by that. That's what the Tanakama holds. V'idich, Rabbi Lazar holds. V'avotcha teaches you something else. That he serves you and not your inheritor. In other words, if the master dies, he doesn't serve let's say he doesn't have a son, he doesn't serve the daughter or the brother of the master. V'idach, what's the other man the learn that? The Chavalei Yarish, V'avatcha Chrinik. According to the Tanakama, there's another Avatcha that teaches you L'chavalei Yarish. That's why he has the Avatcha to teach you Zevalei L'Mecher Atzmai. The Idach, what is Rabbi Lezer? How come Rabbi Lezer doesn't darshan the other Avatcha? Who Lartzois Odin who also? That's just telling you that the Torah is not limiting. It's not a pasuk that limits. What the Chumash is saying, if you see the pasuk inside, Lo Yiksha Beinecha, you don't feel bad that you're sending him free with gifts, because he worked for you 6 years. So it's like a story. It's a sentence, part of a story, not dinim. So you don't learn any halachas out of that. Back. Now the Gemara says, "My Tama." What is the reason? The Tanakama, the Oma Moicher Atzmei Nirtza, right? Why does the Tanakama learn that whoever sells himself, he has no option to say when his term is up that he wants to stay? Oh, so please drill his ear. Moicher Atzmei is not getting his ear drilled. So the Gemara says, "Midi miyat rachmana gabar mechrua bezdin." By mechrua bezdin, as we began this year, that ve'ela hamishpatim ashatosik hisikne eved ibri. That's talking about mechrua bezdin, and there the Torah says, "V'ratza adoinav oznoi b'amei." His ear should be drilled with a martzea, with a drill bit. And we don't need the Torah to tell you that you drill his ear, because there's another pasuk that says, "V'nasatas oznoi v'nasata ba'oznoi." So this oznoi is extra. So we darshan oznoi shaloi v'lois oznoi shel moicher atzmai. Only the ear of somebody who's sold by bezdin, like a ganav who's sold by bezdin, he has the option to extend his term by having his ear drilled, but not somebody who is sold by himself. We go to Tasvav and Alach. So that is the teaching of the Tanakama. The Idach. What does the other man Diyama do? Rabbi Lazar. That's teaching you another halacha. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. Rabbi Lazar says, how do you know it is in the ear, the right ear? How do you know you drill the right ear? Maybe you drill the left ear. It says over here by Buratza Dainav Oznoi Bar Matzeya is by the ear. And V'nebel Halan, it says by Mitzoira Ani, you put the oil by his eyes in his ear. Malahan Yamin. There it says you do it on the right ear. Avkan Yamin. So here also you drill the right ear. So from here you learn another teaching from the word oizen. So it cannot be used to limit that oznoi v'loy oznoi shel moicher atzmai. That's what the other mandiyama does. But what is the Tanagama? They use it as a limitation. And came lemekro oizen. The Torah should say oizen. My oznoi. Why does the Torah use his ear? So it teaches you his ear, but not moicher atzmai. V'idach, Rab Laza, what does he do with the oi, his ear? He mabayle oznoi, his ear, v'loi ozno, not her ear. That teaches you another teaching, that a mavriya does not get this opportunity to extend her term. If her 6-year term is up and she wants to stay longer, she can't stay longer because it says only the man's ear get drilled, not her ear. V'idach, how does the Tanakama know that idea? They learn it v'im yomar ha'eved. Only the Eved says this idea of getting his ear drilled. Ha'eved v'loy oma. Because if you look closely at the pasuk says twice v'im yomar oymar ha'eved. If the Eved says ahafti asadeh, I love my master, she's like, I don't want to go free, then you drill his ear. V'ratzas doinav es oznoi bar matzeya. So we see that this din only applies by an Eved, not by an Amavriya. So v'idach. So no, what does he do with that? It says Eved. So Reb Lezer needs it. In other words, he has to say he loves his master and that he wants to stay on longer prior to his term, his 6-year term expiring. Because once it expires, then he can't say, "Oh, I love my master, I want to stay." It's too late. So Achi Yoimekshu Eved, he has to say it while he's an Eved. So that's what you learn from that Eved. So therefore, he needs another Oznai to teach you Oznai v'lay Oznah. The Tanakama, my Eved, ha-Eved lafka. He learns 2 teachings from that. It says Eved, and it says ha-Eved. So we learn 2 teachings. One, that he has to say it while before his term expires. And also, this din of Nirtza, or Ritzia, only applies by an Eved, but not by an Amavriya. The Idach, and Rab Leza, Eved, ha-Eved like. So this is the bottom line. He doesn't have that extra hey. So therefore, he can only learn one teaching from an Eved. So if he learns Eved for something, Eved, so he needs Oznoi to teach you Oznoi v'loy Oznah, and because of that, therefore, Oznoi cannot limit you and not Moicher Atzmai. Nu Gemara, my Tama, the Tanakama. What is the reason of the Tanakama that says that Moicher Atzmai ein manikeloi? You don't give him a gift when he leaves. Only a Moicher Bezdin, you give him a gift when he leaves, but not a Moicher B'azmai. Answers the Gemara, Miach Rachmana Gam Machruach Bezdin. When the Parsha Machruach Bezdin, it says Hanik Tanik Loi. You give him the gift. Loi, only this type of Eved you give a gift. V'loi leMoicher Atzmai. But not by Moicher Atzmai. The Idach, Reb Lezer says he gives gifts by both of them. Ahuma Bayale Loi V'loi Liyarshav. So you give the gift not to him, but not to his Yarshav. If he died, the Eved died, then you don't give it to his Yarshav. So the Gemara right away asks, Yarshav, am I loy? If the Eved died, why shouldn't his inheritors inherit that gift? Sachi karech money. The Torah called him like a waged worker, like a salaried worker. Ma sachi pulasil yarshiv. If your employee dies, his wages that you owe him still go to his yarshim. Af hai pulasil yarshiv. So also, if this Eved Ivri dies and he's entitled to some gifts, his yarshiv should get it. So what does the law teach you? Loy v'loy yarshiv. Answers the Gemara, loy elaloy v'loy lebal choyvoy. If the Eved Ivri owes somebody money and he's supposed to receive this gift, so you're not allowed to give it to his the person that he owes money to, and that's what it says. Because you would think that since we always hold like Rab Nasan, the Tanya we learned in the Brisa, Omer Rab Nasan menayin lenoish bechaveir mona bechaveir bechaveir menayin shomitzim mezeh v'nois mezeh. If A owes B money and B owes C money, you don't tell A. We tell A, you go ahead and pay C because B owes C money. So that would be the din of Rab Nasan. Talmud Bavli. How do you know that concept? Rab Nasan said, "Nasan la'asher osham loy." So you always give it to the one that he owes to. So I would have thought that since the Adon owes the Eved Ivri a gift, and the Eved Ivri owes somebody money, the Adon should give the gift directly to the person that the Eved Ivri owes money to. That's why I have the drush of loy v'loy lebal chayvay. If loy v'loy lebal chayvay, so then they can't use loy.
Yeah, I'll give him the money.
The idach and the Tanakama holds ba'amanami l'svirin klem lason. We don't hold like Rab Nasan, so I don't need loy to memay loy lebal chayvay. So therefore, according to the Tanakama, loy is loy lemoicher atzmai. No Gemara. My Tama, what is the reason? The Oma moichel atzmai ein rabbi moisulay shivcha kananis. What is the reason why if somebody sells himself as an Eved, he doesn't get his master can't force him to marry a shivcha kananis. Miat rachmona gabe miach rachru bezdim. In Parshas Mishpatim, the Torah says by amachru bezdim im adoinav yitin lo yeshiv. His master gives him a wife. Loy v'loy l'moicha atzmai. Only him he can give a shivcha kananis, but not the other type of Eved called moicha atzmai. B'idach, and the other Mandiyama says loy v'loy bal karcha. The Mandiyama learns from loy. He teaches you can give the Eved a shivcha kananis even against his will. That's what he darshans. B'idach and the Tanakama. He sisnach sa'asochin afke. I learned from Mishnah Sa'asochin. The Tanya Mishnah Sa'asochin avadcha. Socher eino oived el b'yoyim. Eved Ivri oived bein b'yoyim vein b'layla. And Eved Ivri works by day and by night, right? A waged worker only works by day, but Eved Ivri, the Torah says he worked even at night. So the Brisa asks, would you think Eved Ivri oived bein b'yoyim vein b'layla? And Eved Ivri works by day and by night? The Torah says when you purchase an Eved Ivri, he has to eat in your kitchen, he has to eat what you eat, you can't feed him any less than you. So certainly you're not going to make him work double time, work during the day and work during the night. So what does it mean that the Torah says that he worked for you at night and therefore give him a gift when he leaves? From here you see, from here you see that by a mechru bezdem, that the rabbi couldn't force on him to marry a shivcha kanainis against his will. So therefore, once I know that from this pasuk, I have loy freed up to teach me only loy shivcha kanainis applies to by mechru bezdem, but not by moicher atzmai. But Rab Lezer says that it even applies by a moicher atzmai shivcha kanainis ima hasam havamin medaite aval kochaim aloy kamash mulam. Just having that pasuk that tells you that, he worked double, you don't see clearly that the master can force it upon the Eved. You just see that if he did work shivcha kanainis, you should treat him well because he worked at night for you. But it doesn't say there clearly that the rabbi, the master, could force a shivcha kanainis onto the Eved. That's why we need pasuk that says im adoinav yiten loy isha. If the master decides to give him a wife, even against his will. So therefore, loy is not extra to teach you loy v'loy l'meicher atzmai. Now, so the Gemara now goes to a new. So who is this Tana? So we don't have really a Tana that does not learn Sochi Sochir. So Elaman Tana Deli of Sochi Sochir. Who is the Tana that does not learn the Gzeir Shava of Sochi Sochir? So where's there a Tana that doesn't compare Machru Bezdin to Meicher Atzmai? So the Gemara says, "Hi Tanahu." It's this following Tana. Tanya, we learned to the Brayso of Shav El Mishpachtoi. He goes back home. Who goes back at Yovel? If it's telling me by Moicher Atzmai Reikvar Oma, it already says that he goes back by Yovel. Because if you look at the pasuk says that Achnas Yovel Yavinimach. The Moicher Atzmai works to Yovel. And then the Torah says V'shava Mishpachli, he goes back home by Yovel. It says it twice. So it already says by Moicher Atzmai that he goes back home. Even Nirtza, if it's telling you by a Nirtza that if he got drilled his ear, Hare Kavar Oma, the pasuk says that he goes back home by Yovel. That it teaches you a new concept that if Bezdin sold an Eved 2 or 3 years before Yovel. Now, normally the term of a selling of an Eved is for 6 years, but since it's 2 or 3 years before Yovel, Yovel will free him the Eved. Now, the Isal Kadaitach Yolav Sacher Sacher Lamali. If he had a Gzeir Shava Sacher Sacher that tells you Yovel is a free pass that you go free. Neilef Sacher Sacher. Let him learn out Sacher Sacher. Neilef Sacher Sacher from a Moicher Atzmai that he goes by Yovel. So also by a Machru Bezdin would go out by Yovel. I'm for the Gemara, Omar Rab Nachman by Yitzchak. Rab Nachman by Yitzchak said, "Lo'olam yalav sacha sacha." He learns out sacha sacha. The Yitzchak, because I would think like this that although you always compare Moicher Atzmai to Moicher Bezdin, I would think like this. Moicher Atzmai, someone who sells himself, he goes out by Yovel. He didn't do anything wrong. Machru Bezdin, I would think that Machru Bezdin, the Aved Yisuri, he did a big avera of stealing money. Amen Nikna say, let us give him a knas and he should stay there forever. Kamash Malon coming to hear that Machru Bezdin also has this option to go out by free. Amamar, we learned before, Ibn Nirtza Hare Kvar Omar. It already says that a Nirtza goes out Yovel. Mahi, where do we see that the pasuk says that if someone has his ear drilled, he goes out by Yovel? Tiny, we learned in a braysa, and that's the first pasuk in Parshas Bahar. But Machru Bezdin goes out by Yovel. Machru Bezdin goes out by Yovel. If a guy got his ear drilled, he extended his term, and he got his ear drilled, pierced, 2 or 3 years before Yovel. So Yovel might see Yovel will take him out. Now, how do you know that Ish refers to a guy who got his ear pierced? How do you know that it's talking about such a person? So that's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara says that since it says in the pasuk, "V'shaftem ish elachuzasai," "V'shaftem ish elachuzasai." Now, which type of eved only applies by an ish, by a man, but not by a woman? That's nirtza. Drilling. So now Torah says you 2 things, 2 psukim that tell you if someone who has his ear drilled bit is pierced, he goes free by Yovel. And listen to that. I'm sorry. First it tells you by Machru Bezdin goes out by Yovel, and it says you by a Nirtza goes out by Yovel. The Yashmi Machru Bezdin, for the first, if he was sold by Bezdin 2 or 3 years before Yovel, he didn't even stay the 6-year term. Mishum Delaymat Yizimna. I would think that he didn't even stay a 6-year term. Avol Nirtza Demate Zimma. That's why he goes out by Yovel. We give him the free pass. Nirtza, he had a chance to go out free. Say, I would think a Nirtza, you should knas him that he should not go out by Yovel. If we tell you by a Nirtza that goes out free, Mishum da'avad le'sheish, because he actually worked 6, so then he gets the yovel pass. Avo machrua bezdin. If bezdin sold somebody 2 or 3 years before yovel should give him a pass. The loy of it sheish, I would say it doesn't work. Tzrika. That's why I need a pasuk to tell you a regular machrua bezdin goes out by yovel, and a machrua bezdin that had his stayed the term and had his ear pierced, he also goes out by yovel. Now we need 2 psukim by a nirtza that he goes out by yovel. Itzrach l'michtav v'shaftem, itzrach l'michtav l'olam. It have to tell you ba'avodai l'olam, and it has to tell you by a nirtza v'shaftem. He goes back to yovel. He goes back to his father's house by yovel. Because Rachmana l'olam Torah says by a nirtza, he's va'avodai l'olam havamina l'olam amish. That once you get your ear pierced, I would think you stay there forever. Kosav Rachman v'shaftem. That's why the Torah wrote v'shaftem, that the Torah says by yovel you actually go back home. It's not lo'olam forever. It's a 50-year term maximum. Because of Rachman v'shaftem, if the Torah would write v'shaftem havamina hanemi lehechad lo'yav sheish. If you didn't work sheish, then you stay for yovel. But if you actually had your ear pierced and you worked for another 6 years, so I don't think you have to wait for yovel. You had 12 years. Basically, you got 6 years, then you got ear pierced, and you waited another 6 years. You should go free after those 6 years. So when you first sold, sheish, the term is 6 years. So when you get your ear pierced, name sheish. I would think that the term is 6 years. Kamash Malan, if there's 40 years left to yovel, la'olam you stay for yovel. La'olam oshe yovel you stay till yovel. So back to the square one. Ella man tanid lo yal sacher. Who doesn't learn this gzeir shava that equalizes a machru bezdin to a moicher atzmai? So the Gemara says Rebbe. It goes according to Rebbe. Tanya, we learn to the Brisa. We go to Tezvav Mebez another few more minutes. Vim lo yigoel boela. Rebbe Omer. This is talking about a Yid Nabach who lost all his money and now he's sold to a guy, right? And what does the Chumash say? That his relatives should try to bail him out, or somebody else, or he should try to get money to bail himself out. Don't stay by the guy. But if he doesn't come up with the money, then he stays till yovel. So the Gemara Rebbe says, Bel Eilahu Nigal. He could only be redeemed. You could only buy him out. But there's no 6-year term when you're sold to a guy. You're sold to a guy forever, until how much he paid to you up until yovel. Sheyachal, I would have thought, we have a kal v'chayma. A regular evet ivri that's sold to a Jew is not. You don't buy him. He has no option to buy himself out, or his relatives buying himself out. But nigel b'sheish, he has a 6-year term. This evet ivri that's sold to a guy, shenigel be'ela, that the Torah gives you an extra way to get out by having your relative bail you out and buy you back from the guy. Ein adin shenigel b'sheish. So certainly that there should be a 6-year limit on how much the guy could purchase him. Talmud Loimer, the pasuk says be'ela hu nigel, the ein nigel b'sheish. He could only be redeemed this way, but not with the 6-year term. The isal kedaitach. Now here's a little different. If you have this gzeir shava sachir, if there's always a gzeir shava, if Rebbe had this gzeir shava sachir, it says by an eved ivri he's a sachir. That an eved ivri that's sold to a Jew is a sachir. The Torah says ki sachir chetaishav chiyam echachicha, he sachir chetaishav. And then the Torah also says, here it is. It's kimei sachir. When you're sold to a guy, you're also a sachir. So if Rebbe has these gzeir shav of sachir, amai kama mami shenigebe'ela neilef sachir. Why don't you learn out that a Yisrael? Why don't we learn out that an evet ivri that's sold to a Jew also has the option that is relative to bail him out? If there's a gzeir shav sachir, just like we see when you're sold to a guy, your relative can bail you out. So when you're sold to a Jew, your relative can bail you out. Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak said, "La'olam yalav sachir." You also learn out sachir. V'shani hacha over here is different. The Amakra, Yigalenu Lezev, La'acher. So here you have something different, and that is that that the Torah tells you the idea of bailing an eved out, the Torah only limits it by lezeh. Only in this case, when you sold to a guy, then we give the option that a relative to come and buy you back, but not when you sold to another Jew. So there's a special miyat that darshans that. So it could be, Rebbe also has this k'zera shava of sacher. We're going to just do one more minute and then we'll stop. Man Tana, the Gemara just starts off, or just to start it off, Man Tana de Palagodo Rebbe. Who is the Man Diyama that argues on Rebbe? There's a Man Diyama that holds that that there is a sheish term limit by a moicher if an Eved Ivri is sold to a goy. There's a 6-year term limit. It's Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Kiva. Both of them argue. The Tanya, we learned in the Braisa, lo yigal be'ela. Rabbi Yossi Aglili has a limit like this. It's a fascinating machlokes, and we'll end off with this machlokes. And it's a fabulous machlokes. We just learned that concept that when an Eved sells himself to a goy, so then his relative can bail him out, or his somebody else, a stranger, can bail him out. So Rabbi Yossi, what happens when they bail him out? Rabbi Yossi Glila Oima Be'ela, when you're bailed out by a relative, the shichra, you go free. B'shar kol adam, but if another Jew bails you out, then the shibud, you have to work for that other Jew until yovel, until the term is up. And that's what Rabbi Yossi Glili. So it's better if your relative bails you out. Rabbi Akiva says be'ela l'shibud, when just the opposite, when your relative bails you out, you have to work for your relative. But when you work when somebody else bails you out, you actually go free. Okay, we're going to stop over here. The Gemara is going to discuss the reasons behind that. Okay.